Well, we're going to do the second part of this conversation, and I wrote a few things down just before we start, because I think this is crucial to understand it, and I know that you guys are going to help us to really understand this, because we have several different things here. We have structure, and then people mention a thing called systemic racism, and I mean, you're hearing that phrase everywhere you go, systemic racism, and people are like, well, what is it? Because there's a lot of people that, are ignorant. As the saying goes, what I'm saying, sometimes people, the reason they don't do something is because either they're ignorant or they don't care. You know what I'm saying? And then somebody else says, I don't know whether one it is it, and I don't care if I do know that. So showing that we sometimes are the very people who are both ignorant and are careless. And but explain to us a little bit about what systemic racism is, because we've got structures in place, but you've got systems that operate structures. And until we address the systems, we'll never be able to get to the other side of this. So talk to us both from your perspectives. Talk to us, and then maybe we can talk about solutions and what you guys think and what you guys feel about that. If you want to start, Dr. Dorian or Tone.
Okay, so again, from my perspective, systemic racism is a big scary word that people kind of run from. I think people hear it and they think that the accusation is that everybody is a racist, or there's a bunch of racists running around, and I think that is just so missing the point. There are racists out there are racist people, but when you talk systemic racism, and you talk about how a system or a society is designed to be racist, this is how I see that. This is my perspective. If we simply go back to this country, okay, there was a time in this country that an African-American, Negro, black person, whatever term you wanted to use, was considered 3/5 of a person. Not even an entire person. The person with that mindset made the laws and the rules in the criminal justice system. The person that had that mindset made the rules and the regulations in the educational system. The person that had that mindset made the rules, the regulations, and the laws in our economic system. So, I mean, and again, I could go on and on and on, but when we talk systemic racism, what we're talking about is we're talking about a society that has been structured in a way to benefit one group and not another. Intentionally. And the problem is we don't want to face that. As Americans, we don't want to simply look the mirror in the face and say, we come from a hateful, racist background, but now we want to be better. Let's fix it. Until we get to that point, people are going to be confused about systemic racism because they don't understand the system. You know what, I'll say quickly, because I could go forever about this. One point. So right now, everyone's focused on the criminal justice system. But when we talk systemic racism, I want you guys to think about something for a second. When you take a 5th grader who's 10 years old and you start suspending them from school, and they're at home getting in trouble, and they get into the juvenile justice system, and they become 18 years old, and you suspend them from high school, and they get into the adult justice system, and now they have a record. They can never vote, never be a citizen, never be a part of the process again. When you have that as a part of your society, when you have the fact that that child being suspended from school wasn't even allowed access to the inadequate education that's being given in their neighborhood because they're sent home. So now when they try to get to a position like Dorian and I, where in order to be a sergeant in the police department, you got to take a test. To be a lieutenant, you got to take a test. To be a detective, you have to take a test. To get your master's or your doctorate, you have to take a test. And if from the time I've been 5 years old, the system has been holding me back. Someone that has had a better educational opportunity, someone that has had a better socio-economic opportunity, someone that has not had to deal with the lack of a father because they're in the criminal justice system, or someone who has not had to overcome that, has not had to overcome what I have had to overcome simply because I was born black.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah,
Dr.
that's
Dorian.
excellent point. And just to add to that, you know, the laws that most of us can remember are the Jim Crow laws. Those were the laws that basically were the ones that kept blacks down.
Dorian, talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that, because I mean, we hear people say, "Oh, you know, you're the name," and you know, but talk about it.
Jim Crow laws were in the South during 30s, 40s, 50s, and they were designed basically to be what they called separate but equal. And when in fact it was not, it was separate, but it
wasn't
definitely
equal.
was not equal.
Yeah.
And the thing, like what Tony is saying, he grew up in Alabama, he would definitely understand this, is that when it came to education, you have the white schools, they had brand new books. They had teachers that were on it. Not to say that we didn't, but they had access to the best education, access to the books, access to supplies and stuff that it would take to actually educate a child. Whereas what Tony was saying, and in the South at that particular time, access would be whatever's left over from the white schools that may have been, say for instance, whatever publications or books that were given, that they were inferior.
Yeah.
I mean, that might have been 10 years ago from the time that the books were passed on that were used. And sometimes those books are already written in, you get half a book. And the sad part about it is that even the teachers, and they were excellent, but the problem was that they didn't have the supplies and the things that they needed to educate the black children at that time. And it wasn't until the National Guard had to get involved because of the president of the United States who said, you know what, this separate but equal thing is not working.
Yeah.
And he challenged it.
Yeah.
And everyone that challenges those things, I mean, that's when change starts to come about.
Yeah.
And children recognize at that point, because people think that children are not smart. They are very smart.
Yeah.
That's when they're at their smartest, to be honest with you, because they're asking questions. They want to know why. Why is this? Why is that? And so they subjected themselves to go to school with the National Guard guarding them at, I guess it was Kennedy at that time, wasn't it? Or Johnson?
Johnson.
Yeah. And amazingly, that's when things started to change. And you know, the Board of Education had to was it Kansas? I believe it was. Arkansas. Bottom line is that as the education system started to change, then you could start to see some bright light started to come out of the black community. But the bottom line is this: we came here as slaves, chattel property, and supposedly uneducated because we were not educated the way the people here in the United States were educated. They were smart enough to understand that if I look like I can read, if I look like I can write, then I'm going to be killed. And that's the reason why we have this separate but equal. And it's systemic because it's carried over. Even to this day, it still carries over in the minds and hearts of some individuals.
Yeah.
So we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, is that person me? Am I that person that these gentlemen are talking about?
Yeah.
You know, I was just going to add to that because that's phenomenal. And I think the thing that people have to understand when we talk about systemic, because systemic obviously means pervasive throughout our society and our culture. People don't want to talk about slavery. They just don't. It happened. It's real. But I think in order to really understand systemic racism, you have to not only look at slavery, you have to look at what preceded slavery. How these people didn't magically appear in the hull of these boats. Yeah. So the fact that the way that they were killed off, the strongest taken away from the weakest and separated, and the resources taken. But again, this was intentional. It was very intentional to cut off the language, to cut off the communication, to cut off the religion, and replace those things. Those things were intentionally taken away and cut off in order to separate and divide. Yeah. So when they were brought here, what was put in place was exactly what the slave owners or the society that was what they wanted created. Yeah. And you can't say that that was an equal society or that the thought process was equal in any way. And so I think if you're willing to get past the ugly word of slavery and really look at kind of the entire process from start to finish, then it's easy to kind of understand how it's possible.
Yeah, and I think Tony, that you know, I don't know who's watching and how you're watching this, but if you can just sense the love in this room, you know, and just the understanding, and I think that sometimes that's our problem. We get conditioned by people when it comes to specific words. Oh, you can't, you know, oh, that word. But why? Because a word carries with it there's something about that word. There's weight, like the N word you mentioned earlier. There's weight to that word because it's a word used to demean. It was a word used to belittle. And I know that some places now within the black community it's used as affection. You know, which I'm staying away from completely. But the reality is this: is that, and that's fine. But that word was used really to demean and belittle. It was used to put people and you know, Pastor Ryan and I, we've traveled a lot, and we've traveled some of these plantations and looked and if you've never done that, if you want an emotional experience that would literally rock you to your core, is just go on some of these plantations and look at where people live. Look at, and then even within that, the admiration that you will get for people, that even within the derogatory way of being treated as inhumane. And I you know, I think what happens to us, and I'm just going to take the liberty of saying this, and if you're mad at me, God bless you. But I think what happens to us, we're so afraid that people are going to point us out as the culprit, that we try to play this zigzag avoid game. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like you're saying, you know, or we're so afraid that black people is going to say, well, you know what, you are the people that put us in slavery. But we've got to acknowledge our history, because here's the thing: if we don't acknowledge our history, we are deemed to repeat it. It's like some people trying to, you know, not acknowledge that there was a Holocaust. I mean, you literally have people today that's trying to avoid that conversation, and yet there's still some people alive that went through it. And so the reality of that and how people have been treated, I think that's something that has to be talked about, because that brings within it a mentality that has a pervasiveness about it, that now, like you said earlier, that those are the people that create the systems that's never really been addressed, that needs to be addressed now. And not having just so that you know, we're not having an attacking conversation, but we're just having a reality conversation. And some people need to come to reality. You know when we come to reality? Can I tell you when we come to reality? When it affects you. We don't mind, you know what I'm saying? We don't mind when it's on someone else. Well, you know, and it's easy to look at people and say, well, you know what? You just need to move on. You just need to. You know why you say that? Because you've never dealt with it. When you've never dealt with something, it's very difficult to be able to tell people, and it's very easy to say, well, you know, we just need to move on. Well, you cannot move on until you've either done what with it, and until you had processed it. You got to process it. And so if you don't deal with it to process it in order to either possess the, hey, mea culpa, it's, you know what, I've done wrong here. I've had my part in this. And I think that's very important. Now, help us, because I want our audience to really get to a place where we work hard to get on the other side of this equation. What can we do Just give me a few things that you think practically, what can we do in order to begin to not, because I think it's being addressed, but things don't always change just because there's pressure. Human beings have a sense. I don't know about how you guys are in your life, but in my life, when, sometimes mama says to me, okay, come on, we need to deal with this. And then, okay, as long as mama wants to talk about it, I'm quick to dance and quick to, okay, let's do this. But as soon as mama lets off the gas, suddenly I have this incredible thing in me that goes back to the previous behavior. You know what I'm saying?
We all, yeah.
So what I don't want us to, because right now I think there's some gas on this, and I think that we feel the emotion. We I was watching the memorial, part of the memorial today, and you just sense the pain and the emotion of it. And I mean, this is somebody's brother, this is somebody's uncle, this is somebody's son, this is a daddy, this is a granddaddy. I mean, when you understand the humanity of it, I think it changes you, because then you have to address the systems. How can we talk to us a little bit? Where can we start? Like for instance, retraining or that, like for instance within the police force, one of the things that we can do to be able to, to deal with some of this stuff. And because, we have the whole other section I'd say, well, let's just get rid of the police. Let's just, so, I mean, and that's usually the pendulum swings one way or the other. We either go from, because we're emotional human beings. We either go from the one place all the way to the other place. So how do we find a balance, Dr. Dorian?
I'll talk about that for a second here. The police are necessary in a society. We need them to maintain law and order and conformity. However, if you are training an officer to be a certain way, that's how he's going to perform. Whatever it is that he learns in the academy, that's how he's going to perform. A friend of mine, Jim Mahone, was a black instructor at the L.A. County Sheriff's Department. One of the things that he said that I thought that basically stuck with me the entire time, my whole career, and that is, once you have a person in handcuffs, that's it. Game over.
Game over, yeah.
You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to let the dog get a bite. You don't have to let all your buddies get in there and take a punch at the guy because he was running. Game over. He's caught. Take him to the jail. Process him. Do your report. Go back on the street. No extracurricular. You don't have to stop by the hospital first and get the guy all patched up. That was not the way I did policing, and it was mainly because of Deputy James Mahone. I mean, the guy was an excellent, but even him, because he practiced what he preached and preached what he practiced, they ended up figuring out a way to get him out of the system. And they don't want the change. Most people don't want the change in there. They like the status quo. But you look back, you have a sheriff who's in jail now, in federal prison. You have the undersheriff who's in federal prison from L.A. County. The sad part about it is I know a couple of those guys, they're good people, but they let the system run the way it was and didn't want to change it because they're afraid of, well, if I do that, then I'm not going to be the sheriff. I'm not going to be the undersheriff. And it comes back again it comes to economics.
It comes to the almighty dollar, and somebody somewhere needs to be brave enough and to take a chance and to say, listen, we need to do something about this. And because corruption is in the human heart. We know that. But this kind of corruption it's not just one person being greedy and overspending at home, and now they're full of credit card debt and they got their own problems. We're talking about people that have power over other people. And I think that because that badge gives you the authority. And like you guys said, and we want to reaffirm that, you said earlier, you got 98% of police officers that just want to do their jobs. The problem is when you throw everybody within a system, and now you only got 2 or 3 people swimming against the current. So let me ask you this, Tony. Some suggestions within the system. How do we begin to make changes within a system like that? That has that. Where do we start there? Would it start with training? Would it start with what would you say? I mean, I'm throwing words out there. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just.
Well, for me, if we're talking the criminal justice system and policing in general, I think training is extremely important. I think when Dorian mentioned earlier, supervisors need to be held accountable. I mean, the bottom line is, now, I tell Kim all the time, leadership is important.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, anyone working for me as a watch commander would never dare do anything like that.
Yeah.
Because if they get caught, what they would have to deal with from me would be nothing with what they would have to deal with from our commanding officer or anything. If you are a good supervisor, you're not allowing that stuff to happen. And so other officers feel comfortable, going and saying something. And, people talk about those 4 officers and how long people have been out there and this, that, and the other. Wrong is wrong is wrong.
Yeah.
But I just want to kind of throw, you have someone that's been doing police work for 20 plus years and you've been doing it for 7 days or less or a week or less.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not too many people that are going to push that guy off and fight with him in that one instance. Yeah. And it really goes back to what Dorian was saying, was that those were training officers. How these guys are being taught and trained is going to have a lot to do with how they perform. I just want to say one other quick thing. I don't know if most people realize it, but COPS, it's an actual acronym. Community-oriented policing service.
Yeah.
Community-oriented policing service. And we really have gotten away from that, I think, a lot in law enforcement, because, Pastor Hennie was talking about how much authority a badge gives you. And I heard a sheriff on TV talking yesterday about how much power cops have. And the reality is you have 0 power. You have no power over anyone. You have the authority of your organization. If you're a municipal police officer, you have the authority of your mayor and your city council and their ability to write ordinances and control their citizens. But that is why elected officials do that. You agree on how your community is going to run, and the police are supposed to be there just to make sure everyone is in agreement. Yeah. Not out to control everyone, to catch someone doing it the wrong way. And so I think, yes, training needs to happen, but the whole purpose of policing, I think that needs to be addressed. And then I think, from a tactical standpoint, there are some tactics that probably need to be removed, from policing. I think some, people may be jumping the gun on some things, and so I would reserve, some of that simply because, again, having been a defensive tactics instructor myself, you teach police officers you never want to be on the ground. And if you're fighting, you're losing. Those are 2 things. So for me, a prone handcuffing, number 1, is the last thing I want to do. But once I do it, I definitely don't want to spend the next 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the ground with the individual. Yeah. I need to get up. But again, that's a totally different issue. So there does need to be some retraining there. But I think to make it seem like we have a bunch of police officers that are on the street that have been improperly trained, it's probably an exaggeration. But I think getting out, and I'll tell you, and I don't know if Dorian will agree with this, but here's one thing I have said. And if you're a young police officer, even if you're an older, you're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. One of the biggest problems with policing today, Pastor Hennie, they won't park their units and get out of the car. Get out. Go into the businesses. Meet the community. Talk to people. Become a part of the community as police officers. So we need to retrain them to re-engage the community on a positive level, so that when you have these other interactions, some of them will de-escalate it just from familiarity, but then others, we kind of understand each other in the community.
Absolutely, and I think we want to underscore that. I think life works through, you said it earlier, through relationships. You said it as well. And I mean, it's very difficult to shoot people you know. And, you know, I mean, and when you have a relationship with people, knowing where the background of people and where they come from, I think that becomes crucial in helping, you know, as far as with policing. But hey, we're not all police officers. We don't all have that responsibility. There's also education. As far as in the education system, and then within the black community, you know, last week David was talking about, and he mentioned something that maybe some people missed, but he mentioned something very powerful, that he, in his family, he has 5 generations that had a father in the house, 5 generations, and so, but for a lot of people, that's not the case. For a lot of people, they maybe have 1 generation or 2 generation, and I mean, you guys have your own stories as far as that is concerned, you know, and have had dads within the home, and I think that's important to talk about. But then also within the education system, where people are labeled and dismissed, and are left behind and never given opportunity. You both educators, what would you say concerning that?
Again, I would say, from what I've seen, and if I could, I'm just trying to be honest. So,
absolutely, be honest.
So
no, we want you to lie. This the whole thing is about lying.
I'm trying to hold back simply because this topic is what I did my dissertation on.
Okay.
So
there you go, Doc.
So I'm really I'm trying to. But if that isn't, education would be the number 2 problem when we talk systemic racism. Yeah. And again, labeling minority children, and in particular, black children, to the point, most people may not know this, but in the state of California, you cannot give an African-American child an IQ test. There was a court case against the Oakland School Board back in the 70s. Look it up if you'd like. But
within the system.
Yeah.
Meaning we cannot officially do an IQ test. And so part of assigning a student to special education, I got to give you an IQ test. You score, you know, an 85, you know, out of 100, I put you in special. Well, if I can't give you an IQ test, there are some other tests, but I get to decide without an IQ test whether you get labeled special education or not. And so what ends up happening is you're a discipline problem. So now you become special education. And we're going to track you through these classes and this, that, and the other. And so now that little black African-American kid doesn't get to take AP classes, doesn't get to take honor classes, doesn't get to do well on the SAT and the ACT and apply to Harvard or Stanford or Cal Berkeley. That kid has automatically been given, at best, an opportunity to be in one of our community college classes. That's not the end of the world. So everyone knows, you know, because again, I'll be the first to say that I graduated high school at 17. I went to the military with a high school diploma only. And I sit here with a doctorate. And so I'm not saying going through community college is negative. I'm simply saying opportunity, equity, and access. It's not fair if automatically what you have access to is less than. Yeah. You're being treated like less than already. Yeah. Then you're given access to less than, but then you're expected to compete on the other end on what everyone says is an even ground. And that's just not true. So when dollars aren't being pumped into the black community, into the black schools, but they are being pumped, you know, into the white communities, then that's what you see. You know, one of the things when we were talking the other day with the guys is, I go, if you look at our community, Temecula and just Temecula, Marietta, in this little vicinity, we've got 6 high schools and I think 3 police departments. If I took the same square mileage, I'm pretty sure it's at least the opposite in LA. LA probably has 6 police departments and 3 schools within a 5 to 7 mile radius. Why is that? Why is the money in the community going to our schools and our parks here, but they're going to, you know, policing agencies and things like that? And it just seems like, and I'm not saying the policing isn't necessary.
Sure. Sure.
But it seems to me we should be taking that money and saying, why do we have a policing problem?
Yeah.
And if we start dumping that money into education, if we start keeping more of those elementary and junior high kids in school and off the street and out of the system before they're 14 years old, then we'll start seeing some changes in our criminal justice system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that all we want is hope. And I think every human being wants to live with hope. And will tomorrow be better than today? Can I trust that if I work hard, if I like everybody else? I mean, we have this in the statements that we make, in the declarations that we make, and that says that with liberty and justice for not some. For all. And I think that's part of that sometimes the other part of the equation where people are even scared to say Black Lives Matter, but people who are saying, and I don't want to generalize it, but people who say Black Lives Matter is not saying other lives don't matter. They're just saying that until Black Lives Matter is the same as every other life matter, things are not the same. And I think that when you begin to understand perspective and begin to have conversation with people, and I think that's really where the direction that we are going into, and the direction that we feel that is necessary. Dr. Dorian, give us some last thoughts on anything you feel that would be good, that would be challenging, or just encouragement or whatever you feel like. And because as I say, this is an environment of perspectives. It's fine to have a perspective, and it's good and well. And we don't expect everybody to jump on board and say we agree or disagree. This is not about that. This is just about talking about stuff that we feel is high time to be talked about. So. Talk to us a little.
I was thinking
share thought with us.
What we've been talking about, and what Tony was saying. There's individuals like ourselves, and I mean everyone that's up here, is that we need to step up, because there are a lot of families where there's no fathers in the home, but yet and still you have a single mother who's having to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to make sure that at least she can make ends meet. And without people like ourselves who are educated, and I'm not saying that makes us superior. What I'm saying is that we need to step out and help reach down and help pull these kids up, so that they can recognize that, okay, once we start doing that, because like right now I can say both of my sons pay it forward. They will step up, and I'm really proud of them, because they recognize that the fact that, hey, my father was there doing this, and doing this, and I want to help and do the same thing. Well, now it's in their system. We're talking about systems.
Yeah,
it's in their system.
It's in their mentality.
Yeah, and they want to get out there and help, and to watch them do that. I mean, it's unbelievable, because I'll see them, either get shoes or get a suit for a kid that's getting ready to go interview, and they don't. The kid doesn't understand. Well, why are you doing this? Yeah, and then they explain. Well, my father. That's what he did. He was just like that, and I can't help it. That's what I want to do. Yeah. And they're paying it forward.
That's beautiful.
And I think that's what we need to help and support that type of mentality. And the more that we do that, that's going to create this world to be a better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tony?
I would just briefly like to say, kind of like to piggyback on that and just say simply, I think if we said, what can we do? What can the average person do? And I know that we're trying to get some lasting social change and legislation and things like that, but honestly, my personal opinion is, I think what we can do and what everyone else can do is not stop. Not worry about what the laws are, not worry about what they do in Congress and this. Just start treating each other better.
Beautiful.
And if we, right now, all these different people have come together, if we just don't stop,
Yes,
if
stay
everyone just stays together. So that would be what I would ask, is that the togetherness, the sentiment, the feeling that we have right now, don't stop. And remember that if this is actually a true democratic republic, if it's truly the ideals that I spent my adult life defending, 13 deployments, 8 combat deployments, I feel like I shouldn't be afraid of the police. I am. I feel like I should be able to walk down any street in America, and there's plenty in Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas that I won't go near. That's the reality of where we live. So I would just ask, could we all just continue this so that we get to a point that we care about one another? And if we do that in a democratic republic where the people actually have the power, then we will get the right people in place. They will make the right decisions, and we'll start getting the change and seeing the change that I think everyone is asking for right now.
Absolutely. And I would personally even take that one step further. And the step that I would say further is that all change starts with us, and it starts in the heart. And it is truly, for us as Christ followers, because that's what the three of us are, first and foremost, we love God and we love Jesus. And God has changed our lives, and we know what God has done. And I love what the two of you just said, because, you know, two things that just stuck out of me. Pay it forward. If God has blessed you and you pay it forward. Nobody wants to be a token person. Don't have token friendships. Have friendships. You know, and I think I think that's we had a conversation earlier with a few folk, and that's exactly what they say. You know, that's what we were talking about, and you know, I think that's crucial. And Tony, I love what you say too, and that is the fact that, hey, you know what? If we can just don't stop, you know, is this like a wound that has been opened? And finally, it's like, okay, we are starting to pick stuff out of it and starting to say, okay, well, where do we need to heal? What do we need to do? So let's not stop this. Let's really, and not in any way is any person pointing fingers and say, well, you. We're saying we. We're saying we, and that's the thing here at the Rock Church that we are passionate about that we embrace people and love people and accept people for who they are. And you know, and not who they are as far as who they are the way I think who they are. And I think that is crucial for us to recognize and realize. And gentlemen, I just want to say thank you. Dr. D, you know, you and I have come a long way together. I mean, you and Justice Carroll have taught the marriage class for, what is it, 10, 11 years now? 11 years. And Tony, Dr. Tony, I mean, you and Kim are nothing but blessings and some just, I mean, sweetness itself. And we've walked roads together. We've walked on the streets of Jerusalem where our Jesus walked. So you know, and we just want to encourage you. Have a perspective. You know, talk to people, and then love people, and then be part of the change. Be part of this. And when something is wrong, don't defend it. Call it what it is. When it's racism, don't try to get pet names for it. It's racism at the core, and it is sinful, and it is wrong. The only thing you do with that is you repent, and you ask God to change your heart. And that's, I believe, will bring about the change that's necessary. So, Dr. D, would you just pray a short prayer for us? Absolutely. And we just thank the Lord. Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate you a lot.
Thank you, Father, for letting us be here with Pastor Hennie, and Pastor Hennie stepping up his game, which he always does. He's a good guy. And putting us forward to put this information out there and discussing some hard topics that people a lot of times don't even want to address. But God, hopefully, will reach the people that are out there in the airwaves who are listening to this or who are watching this, and for them to continue asking God to help them to step up and do their part. And whatever's going on inside of you, especially those individuals that are out there with the violence and hurting the individuals that are really trying to help us, check yourself. Look deep inside yourself and ask yourself, why am I doing this when these people are out here supporting us, trying to help us to get through this system? I just ask God that everyone in the Rock Church be safe, especially during this COVID-19. And again, we love you, Pastor Hennie and the staff and Miranda. We love you all. And thank you, Father.
Amen. Thank you, gentlemen. Tune in again next week. We love and appreciate you. God bless you.